Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review covers the Ford GT. It's a 124 scale kit from Tamiya, number 24346. Now I would rate this as an advanced skill level kit. Although they have learned to do a lot of things right, some of the stuff can really be tricky here for the novice builder. Some of the small decals and the two-piece side view mirrors are pretty interesting. Also, some of the larger decals are difficult to apply. Construction itself is a little difficult because of the tolerances of the parts and the way they fit together. If you don't have a few dozen kits under your belt, you might want to wait until you get some practice on this one. Now the kit consists of 132 parts molded in white, black, gray, clear, chrome with vinyl tires and metallic transfers. Now 132 parts is usually seen in 2 or 3-in-1 kits, so there's a lot of pieces that go into this one single purpose model. It also includes some excellent water slide decals, window paint masks, and a nice set of instructions. One issue that I noticed with the silver decals was that they seemed to be pretty susceptible to water spotting with the decal setting solutions. Now aside from that, the kit comes with some very involved instructions, and it also has the upper half representation of the V6 motor. Now the Ford GT itself is a stunning supercar that competes favorably with the best of the breed at a price they haven't seen in decades. Now Tamiya, not being wished to left out of the fray, has produced a similarly gorgeous replica of the car in scale for the advanced builder. There's a lot of things to love about the kit and some things that could be improved, including some suggestions at the end of the review for Tamiya to take to heart. But in the end, if you want a great looking model of this superb car, this is the best example on the market. Here are the contents of the kit, and as you can see, each color tree was bagged separately, and it includes special bagging for tires and transfers and glass. And these are the decals, and I strongly suggest you use some setting solution for the longer stripes here. Also, there's 4 stripes, so you can use any color combination. But please beware, remove any water or setting solution from the decals as they set and dry to prevent water spotting. The instructions here are pretty well represented, but I find them pretty congested and sometimes difficult to follow. They've also noted when they're not going to use certain decals that are on the sheet, and when there's no color specified, as it says here, use the body color. But that isn't always the case. The lower skirts here, which are a black color, don't have anything specified, and so you'll have to use reference photos to really understand how to finish the kit. Now we'll be using thin super glue and thin model cement and thin paint to paint this model, otherwise the parts won't fit together. I began construction with this kit by starting on the body, and as you can see, there are parting lines on this one just like there are in any other kit, and you'll have to remove those. They're pretty soft, but use a light sand paper and make sure that you remove that. Also at the rear there was a couple of sink marks on the top deck of the quarter there, and those will have to be filled and sanded smooth. And next we'll add the inner fenders to the back end and make sure you use light cement and press those parts together till they fit into the fitting stops. Otherwise the other parts will not fit. Also the inner headlight area there, we're going to add that now. You can see the inner fenders in place here, and I mark the parts with left or right markings so that I know which way they go into place when I position them. There's some pretty pronounced sprue tab here where the connection was at the bottom of the skirt. Make sure you sand those off or these parts will not fit. Now we can go ahead and add the outer fenders, and notice that that peaked point there goes all the way up to the middle of the window on top of the roof in the recess there. Use thin cement and push these parts all the way till they stop into position. Now the front and rear fascias are also similarly difficult to install. You're going to have to start in the middle with the larger surface area. Get that glued substantially and then make sure that it's seated. And then go ahead to the outer edges with some light super glue or very thin cement and glue those into position one at a time. With the body all constructed, we're going to use some light sandpaper 1000 grit, wet or dry, and give it a nice wet sand lightly to give it a little integrity, make sure everything's smoothed out, and then we're going to give it a coat of white primer. So here is the vehicle body and some of the side pieces, the rear spoiler and the mirrors, ready for primer. And once that is done, you're going to let that set and dry. You see here in the photo a picture of the Tamiya fine surface primer that I used. You need to use thin paint for this model, and also some of the exceptional Gravity Colors for GT liquid blue. Now they have produced a line of the standard colors for the GT, but it turns out that the GT can be painted any color you want for a mere $30,000 upcharge. And so here's the vehicle painted with Gravity Colors Ford GT liquid blue, and it's much like the box art, but I love this color, and the luminescence of the fine metallic in the paint just turns out beautiful, especially over a light colored primer, and that's why we used a white primer, and just so happened that Tamiya made the fine white primer. Now we can start working on other aspects of the kit, and these parts will be painted semi-gloss black. The ones that will be flat black will be given a coat of flat spray later, but most of this will all be semi-gloss black. The seat inserts and the other pieces you see here for the dashboard will be painted with the fine white primer and then touched up when they're removed from the tree. So we're going to work on the window glass next. The window surrounds come with paint masks, and you can apply those, and then of course you paint the surrounds there with some semi-gloss black. Follow the paint instructions. And that one in the windshield, it took about 9 tries to put into position, and even when you do that, you probably still find you're going to have to do a little touch up after you get the glass off. Now we're going to add the decals and the mirror transfer here for the rear view mirror and the windshield wiper blades. This is a very nice setup, and the metallic transfers are excellent. Most of these pieces that were painted semi-gloss black also get some they're going to get some metallic treatment. Most of these are flat aluminum with a little detailing up there on the engine block, but we'll get into that later. Now we'll start working with the decals, and they're very good decals. They lay right. They're not too thick or too thin. The register is excellent. And you get 4 colors for stripes, which is really nice. But there's no way to put them into position without eyeing them up, just carefully putting them where they need to be. Use plenty of warm water and some of the decal setting solutions on the market, but don't let that solution set on top of the decal, especially the silver ones, as you'll see evidence of water spots afterwards. Now add a nice clear coat to really bring out the shine on that blue paint. While those decals are drying, we can add a little detail to the side marker lights and the tail lights. Now of course the top ones there are a stoplight red with a silver backing, and the tail lights have just a ring of red down inside of the tail light lens there. I used some super glue to set the bezels into place there, and then some white glue to install the tail lights into position. With the decals dried now, we can use something soft to place it on, turn it over upside down, and start adding the vent glass, which is really just a carrier for the decals, the mesh decals that go over them. I would have expected Tamiya to maybe supply a little piece of photo etch brass here instead, and it probably would have been cheaper overall and more realistic, but this is what we have, so go ahead and put those in with some clear glue, and then we'll get to the decals later. So get these parts out of the kit. There's some glass pieces there, upper and lower headlight lenses, and the rest of the housing and portions of the headlights. These are models in themselves, as you can see, and I found it necessary to really sand off about half the lower housing section in order to get these to stack in here without protruding up through the glass that goes over the top. But they go together nicely, and you can see some insets there. And those were treated with a little black wash to give them some definition. There's also some GT headlights that go on there, and the arrows here show where the headlight lenses are placed on the upper and lower housings. And now we can get the pieces out for steps 7 and 8 here, including the turn signals or the side markers that we had painted and backed with silver earlier, and we're going to put those all into place now. And it's a nice effect with the drop-in panels there. As you can see, those black panels are nice and crisp, and as you glue the pieces into place, you'll find that the headlight lenses have nice tabs on them that glue properly into position, and then you put the headlight nacelles in place too. So these pieces are used to work on the back end, and that fascia there, along with the shroud that goes around the engine, the exhaust ports, and the rear side markers, and some side panels. Now, all of the pieces here are semi-gloss black, except of course the side markers, and those go into place using some clear glue, and they only fit one way. So look where the bevel is, and that goes towards the inside and against the body. The instructions aren't real clear on the interior panels there in the front of the fenders, so you can see how they're positioned here. And of course there's the that shroud that goes around the motor and the back fascia. The exhaust ports are now put into place too, and you can use some thin glue for these pieces. Now all the fascia on this kit, basically I left a semi-gloss black as opposed to some of the gloss black that they indicate. I just don't, it seems to me like it's in between, and I like the semi-gloss look better. Except for these uprights on the A-pillars, they are painted gloss black. So I had gone ahead and painted the interior of the roof here on the underside flat black, and also the surrounds around the side pillars and the C-pillar there for an interior black which fits with the rest of the interior color. Once the black dries on the interior and the roof, you can go ahead and glue those windows in. They've got some nice gluing tabs, so just make sure you remove any paint from anywhere that you have chrome or glue or paint. Make sure that it sticks well with the adhesive, and then go ahead and glue those into place with some clear glue. And then you can see from this action shot here that your car is looking pretty well. Also, make sure that you add the rear view mirror to that window if you didn't do that earlier. So with the the faux window or vents in place, so we can go ahead and add the faux window mesh decals to make that look or give it an appearance of the vent mesh that would normally be available for airflow on the model. Now we can work on the brake calipers and rotors. The rotors are an aluminum color, and the calipers are different colors. The back one there is kind of a dark metallic, and the forward one, or the larger one, the Brembo brake, is can be a number of colors. I painted mine blue to kind of match the body. Now there's also Tamiya has also come up with a clever way to add a split collar inside the steering knuckle there in order to fix the axles into place with a tapered, or I should say a friction fit, allow them to rotate and still be inserted in there. And you just split that black piece. There's 4 of them that go into the knuckles, and once you've got that in there, you glue the rotor over the top of it, and you'll note there the split collar is in place, and the notches there match each other so that you can't get them together wrong. So you'll glue those into place, but keep glue off of the collar. So we'll continue now with the front end, and as you can see, the larger piece here, the front end of the pan is semi-gloss black, and then the flat aluminum parts comprise the rest. And we'll be assembling those together. We will glue the suspension piece there. That's the lower control arms. It's in the A-frames, so to speak. In between these two pieces, the upper and the lower portions of the front end of the lower pan. So turning that over now, we can add the upper A-arms and suspension frame along with the knuckles and the tie rods, which go onto each of those spindle heads separately. Now the steering knuckles aren't really glued into place. The lower portion just hooks into the upper there, and then you bring those down and you snap those A-arm pieces into the back one, into the hooks there, and then the tie rods go on the forward ones, and that provides the ability to turn and pose the wheels. Here it is at a side angle. You can see how it all comes together. There's a similar construction using these pieces for the rear suspension, with one exception. The half axles there are simply glued to the inside of the rotors, and the split collars work the same way. They go into the knuckles, and then the knuckles are essentially glued into place, but these are some pretty flimsy and very thin glue points. Once I got them in place with some super glue, I actually went over the outsides of those with some epoxy to keep them into place. The main suspension cage goes together pretty well with the 3 posts there, and that's good for strength. And then once you've got the knuckles and the half axles installed, we can add the strut arms and the shock absorbers into position. You can see here that they will be inserted into the cage points, and you may have to touch up those pieces after you cut them off of the sprue trees for a finish. So the shock absorbers, you can see the uppermost points there where the pivot is. They simply attach to the top of that frame section and then down into the bottom of the knuckle. And the tie rods, of course, they go from the knuckle to the frame there in the forward section. Here's another look at it from the other side. The suspension piece is finished. We can go ahead and work on the lower pan, and it includes some of the skirting for the body that goes underneath the painted portion. And then I painted the back end there a gloss black. It seemed to be pretty shiny from most of the photos that I could see. And then we're going to add those flares here to the sidewalls. I left those semi-gloss black, and they fit tight and close, so make sure that you scrape any glue off or paint off, and then use some thin glue for construction. Next, we'll use some super glue to add the front section of the lower pan, the underbody there, together. There's just 2 small notches and receiver holes, and then a plate that glues onto, and also the back end that fits into that mostly triangular section there. Scrape the glue off and glue it in position with some super glue, and then use some clamps on the front end to make sure that it would dry nice and true. And so here's what the upper side of the lower body will look like, and the suspensions are in position. Once again, they're fairly fragile. You'll need to use some strong glue and make sure that those parts fit together, and scrape any glue for the joints to make sure that you get good adhesion. And here's what the bottom side of the chassis pan will look like once you get to this point. Now we'll grab the interior parts. As mentioned before, the headrest there, or not the headrest, but the shoulder surrounds are painted white, and we'll be detailing the seats with a little bit of silver there on the inset. That was done with a 1mm chrome pen and then given a little flat finish. And those are very attractive when they're all installed together, and they add some breakup to the normally all flat black interior. Also add a little gloss red detailing to that small section just at the front of the console there. The dash is pretty nicely detailed. I think the 2 main sections could have been molded as one piece, but it still goes together well and it fits well. So there's also a piece of that white accent that goes around the bottom, and the steering wheel is flat black around the handle grip around the outside, and the inside is a semi-gloss black, along with the handle grips for the instruments or the controls there right behind it. There's a really nice decal for the speedometer and info center, and you just cut that out and glue it in place. You don't need to use water slide decal to get it off of there. Just put it into position. Now we can go ahead and add that white panel there as part of the dashboard motif, and this is against a red background so you can see it, and so there's the top and the bottom, and with the additional decals that are put into place around the dash and the top section in position. It traps everything in place there. She looks really good. Now we can go ahead and install those seats into position, and the white surrounds there, the neck braces so to speak, along with the rear section top there, and the window glass which you'll put into place with some clear glue. So here is where the interior pieces will all start coming together. You can see the interior tub there, along with some skirting, the inside of the interior walls, and the dashboard. So scrape the paint off and add the interior tub there on two bosses and receiver holes in the bottom of the tub with some nice strong glue, and then add the dash into position there. Now the dash doesn't mount very well. It's a pretty tenuous connection. So put a little glue on the tab that goes to the center column, and then put some super glue out on the edges where those tiny little bosses will drop into some half round slots. We assemble the engine next, along with the decals. The air canister there is chromed, and as you can see, the lower portion of that manifold is a black semi-gloss, or I should say the upper portion, and then the center and the other portions are aluminum, with except for the upper portion of the heads. They're actually a metallizer color. Now there's a small tube that runs on the underside of the top portion of the induction thing there, and that gets glued into position. I don't know why that's a separate piece, but put that into place first, and then of course the lower manifold goes right onto the block section, and then it goes on top of that, the air canister then, and there's a little bit of detailing there on the forward section. There's some straps on something that are detailed with some silver paint. I used chrome pen for that, and then a little dull coat to tone it down. There's 4 pegs and receivers on each corner of the motor block there, and the bracket, so they just slip into position, and you just glue them there, and it's there you go, the top half of an engine. It's kind of ironical here because the old kit makers used to get a lot of criticism for putting the bottom half of the engine and molding it right into the lower chassis, and we kind of have the reverse of that here. Okay, well, if your patience has lasted this long, you now have most of your lower section, including the interior and motor, in place. Next, we'll take a look at these pieces to build the wheel and tire assemblies. The rear tires are larger than the fronts, and you can see that in both the tires and the wheels. And there are some center caps attached to this portion of the tree. You can see the center cap there in the middle, and I used a little bit of black wash to bring out the detail on the lug nuts, and I painted the entire thing a flat spray clear so that it would tone down the chrome a little bit. Here you see them constructed, and there's some decals that go in the center caps there, so there wasn't a real need for separate ones. You're going to cover them up anyway, along with a picture of the brakes, and here's the decal for the Brembo brakes that's put into place there, and that really looks nice. A little black wash for the cross-drilled holes. And finally, you're going to want to note that on the back side of these wheels, there are 5 ejector pin marks on each one, along with sprue tabs. Those are the blue arrows. So if you're doing a contest model, you'll have to clean those up. Now we're going to mate the body to the lower chassis It's a real wiggle fit. I always take a little bit off of the front and rear edges to make sure that they don't bind when they go into place. Just take off about 50 thousandths. It seems to always help, and you never know for sure because, well, you didn't break your chassis in half because you did it. So that's just a suggestion, but just wiggle it into place. Seem to go in to the front end first easiest, and then just wiggle it back down. Make sure you spread the sides out carefully, listen for stress, and then drop her into place. Now mine wouldn't really snap down. I suppose I had a thickness of paint somewhere that prevented it. So I used a little super glue to glue the edges of the frame and the pans, etc., in the front and the back together to make sure that they stayed in position. Now we use these pieces for the two-piece mirrors, and of course the top portion was painted body color earlier, and we'll add those great looking metal transfers for mirror surfaces and glue those into position in the slots on the sides of the body. And also we're going to add the rear reflectors on the back end fascia too. These were all of the parts that I had left over, mostly just some decals that aren't used. There are some kind of Nerf bar looking decals, and they're supposed to go around the headlight assemblies inside. I just didn't like the looks of that, but you could do that, or you could use a silver pen to recreate that. And also I replaced the Ford plate with a custom plate of my logo. I just printed it out on some plain white paper and put a little cellophane tape over it and glued it into position because it's one of my stable cars, just like Jay Leno's, and so that's the way I like them. Well, there you have it. Your 1/24 scale Ford GT is finished, and it is a superb looking model. It will take a lot of patience and skill to put this together properly, and mostly paying attention to the fact that you can't use thick glues or paints, and you'll have to make sure that everything fits together just right before you let the glue set. There's a couple of other issues, but all in all, when it's all said and done, if you follow the instructions and you're patient and you put it together properly, you'll get a great looking model when you're done. So there you have it. If I were you, I'd go and buy one and put it on my shelf. So here's kind of a recap of the highlights and lowlights of this kit. A lot of things are just subjective, but like I said, all is said and done, this is the best kit on the market for this particular model. And you can see some of the things here that I would have changed or done differently, and some of the things that they did well when designing this kit. But it's up to you. You can take this for what it's worth and just kind of keep it in mind as you're going through the build, and with the review you'll be able to come out with a top-notch model that is ready to win your local contest. So go ahead and give it a try. And you know, you can always find us on Facebook, but this is where you'll find premium model kit reviews, and we do have a website. It's rightonreplicas.com. So if you don't want to miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking on the logo in the lower right hand corner. Thanks.